I'm Leila Atassi with the Northeast Ohio Media Group. For the past week and a half on cleveland.com, you've read the stories of people who sued the city of Cleveland, alleging that their encounters with Cleveland police officers ended with them being needlessly beaten, shot, shocked with tasers, or arrested for crimes they did not commit. Their stories have provided a historical context for the U.S. Department of Justice's 21-month investigation, which concluded that Cleveland police officers too often use excessive force against their citizens. I'm joined by my team of colleagues who collaborated on this project during the past 2 months, the Plain Dealer's Rachel Dissell and the Northeast Ohio Media Group's Brandon Blackwell and Cory Shaffer. The four of us and our colleague Riley Danilko, who is not sitting with us here today, invite you to join us for an online chat about this project beginning at 9 a.m. today. To kick that off, let me ask you guys, if you would, just to reflect a little bit about the past 2 months of reporting. We fielded some criticism from readers who feel like it was unnecessary for us to write about these lawsuits that in some cases are, several years old. Tell me, what do you think has been the value in this collection of stories?
I think what we found over the last decade echoes a lot of what the Justice Department found in their investigation. So I think that adds a lot of value to what the Justice Department found. And looking at these cases really puts, faces and names to some of these accusations against the police officers.
Mm-hmm. And Brandon, I think that one thing people should note is that we put in a public records request for these lawsuit settlements a year ago, probably almost more than a year ago now. So we were trying to get the information before the Justice Department report came out so that we could find out about these cases. We didn't actually get the information until the eve of the report being released. The reason that we asked for the information in the first place was really so that we could look at what accusations had been made against police in the past, how much the city had really had to pay out for this. Was it costing the city an extreme amount of money? Was it not really an impact on the city's budget? So we had a lot of reasons for asking for it. And I think that what we actually found out is that the U.S. Department of Justice report really reflects these lawsuits as much as the lawsuits reflect the report.
And another thing I think it shows is that it's not just a new thing. I mean, these accusations have been made for 10 years, and it's clearly something the Justice Department feels needs to be addressed. And that's that's what led up to the Justice Department investigation.
Actually, the second Justice Department investigation, the lawsuits that we're writing about were all filed after the first Justice Department investigation resulted in an agreement between the City of Cleveland and the Justice Department for some reform to be made.
Right. We've gotten a lot of questions online about our methodology. How did we go about reporting these, and what did we include when we were looking at the available public records? Who wants to kind of talk about that a little bit?
Well, what we did was the list that we originally got from the city after we put in a public records request was more than 100 cases. The first thing we did was look through every single one of those cases and kind of weed out the ones that didn't involve an accusation of force or a civil rights violation. Mm-hmm. We tried to stick to the ones that were within keeping with the Justice Department. Did someone say that they were roughed up by police, that there was police misconduct, that they were arrested when they shouldn't have been? And once we boiled that down, it was a little more than 60 cases, I think. So the reporters divided those up, and we kind of dove in. We went into the court records and the public records to find out everything we could about the case. We didn't just read what the plaintiffs said happened. We read depositions, we read the city's response. Often there were hundreds or thousands of pages of documents with each case. And what we tried to do is boil down those cases into capsules with information referencing what both sides said happened. We weren't trying to make a determination in any particular case who was right or wrong, just what the sides said. And then what we try to do is step back and say, what themes were here? What things occurred over and over again that we could use to write stories to kind of illuminate the different patterns that we saw.
Mm-hmm. And we also reached out to the city and to the police union about the officers who were named in these lawsuits and asked them to respond if they cared to about specific allegations that were made or certain settlements.
Yeah, and the police unions did decline to speak specifically about certain cases. So, we try to get some information from them, but they declined.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the release of the DOJ report preceded our exploration of these lawsuits, and many of the themes that the Justice Department picked up on in their investigation were echoed in the cases that we examined. So a lot of the themes that Rachel was talking about really didn't come as a great surprise. But what did surprise you? Did you learn anything about how these cases were handled that was different from what you expected?
I wouldn't say this is so much of a surprise as it is I guess, an eye-opener in how there are at least two sides to each of these stories, sometimes more. And, for example, the Rafael Correa case where this man was tasered on the street after complying with police orders to put his hands up, get on his knees, take his backpack off, and after that the officer tased him. And just seeing that, I think it all kind of put it into perspective for me, because a lot of the times you're just reading these court documents and you don't get to see the outcomes or the actual incident. And we do a lot of research and read a lot about this, but once these videos and these photos and these interviews started happening, it was just like, wow. I mean, you get to see what it does to a human being when they are the victim of excessive force or a wrongful arrest.
I think the videos played a big part of it too. Is this, the case that I had that had the video with it with Judy Patrizzi's his defense attorney who got arrested at Bounce. The video clearly did not gel with what the officer said happened, and I think the readers picked up on, this could happen to anybody. This woman was at the club enjoying the night with her friends, and then she was all of a sudden arrested. And this, I think, really brought it home that, it's not just in, the neighborhoods where police think no one's looking, that some of these allegations are made. It's at nightclubs with, defense attorneys, and I think that made people realize it could happen to anybody.
And one of the things that, I did speak to Cleveland Union President Steve Loomis, and he, in speaking generally about the cases, was really emphasizing that these are just a small minority of interactions that police have with the public. And so it could be really easy, it could easily be caught up, with each case. What happened in this case? What are the details? There are two sides to it. But one thing that I found interesting was to kind of take a step back and say, what happened again and again? What was pointed out again and again? And for me, whether there was discipline or not, and some of the issues around that was pointed out again and again. We found, several officers that had been sued multiple times, 4, 5, 6 times. And there's a question there as to what does that mean? And I think, too, with the city, one of the questions that we tried to put to the city, and they're not monitoring this, and I don't think they still are, was anybody kind of looking to say, there's been these lawsuits filed, what can we learn from them? Is there a way we can better train officers? Is there a way we need to deal with discipline differently if we see similar allegations across multiple cases over a decade? So I think that's kind of one of the takeaways is, does the city need someone to step in and look at these as a whole? Not just the civil lawsuit, but do they need to look at the civil lawsuit, what discipline is involved, and and then the criminal part of it. One of the things we had a really hard time with is we asked the city for records on these cases in terms of who was disciplined, and then decisions made from internal affairs investigations, whether someone should be charged or not. And that's still really murky as to how the city handles that and looks at it as a whole. And I think going forward, that's a question that we need to continue asking. How can that be better handled?
Yeah. Brandon, you mentioned the case involving Rafael Correa, and we had the video footage of him being tased on the sidewalk. What other stories that we've told in the last week and a half stick with you? Which ones resonated with readers the most?
I think the other one I had was the Narland Shad case. And Shad was a disabled veteran. He was taught at Cleveland Municipal School District. He was a special ed teacher. He coached high school girls basketball at Padua Franciscan as well. And he just went out with his family to an Indians game. It was like a couple days after his birthday, so he was probably celebrating his birthday. And he got punched in the face during a traffic altercation with a cop that he said, he stopped well short of where the officer who was directing traffic, who was another officer who had been sued multiple times. and the officer said he didn't, and they actually bumped him, and it escalated from there, and it ended up with the officer punching Narland in the face. And I think, to me, that is another example of just some random person who was out, minding his own business. And readers, I think that those two, the Patrizzi case and the Shad case, are really the ones that made them question what happened.
Yeah.
I think that, too, one of the things that these cases can be is a window into culture. And in interviewing one woman named Tamela Eaton, she sued the city over an altercation she had with officers Tim Guerra and Frank Garnback being the person that was driving the cruiser in the Tamir Rice case. And after that happened, she said one of the most frustrating things to her was that she sued the city after she said that she was beat up during an altercation with them. The city settled for a large amount of money with her. I believe it was over $100,000. And even after that, one of the officers was promoted. He's a sergeant now. And another officer, Frank Garnback, was made the training officer for Timothy Lohman in the Tamir Rice case. And when she looked at it after that, she said, how does that happen? Shouldn't you be put on a desk job after someone sues you and they're awarded $100,000? That's a huge amount of money. But instead, people are promoted and then let to train other people. And so in her estimation, how do you change a culture when that is happening?
So that resonated with readers quite a bit when they were reading stories like that. I mean, I did see a lot of readers were curious about the values of each of the settlements. It seemed people were speculating quite a bit about whether a high settlement meant that the plaintiff was in the right or a low settlement meant, and really what it seems to boil down to is whether or not litigating the case would cost more to the city than it seemed to be. Tell me about your experiences meeting with or talking to some of the plaintiffs in these cases. What was it like to Did they actually talk to you, or did they seem fearful of going on the record with their experiences?
Well, I actually wasn't able to reach any of the plaintiffs, or they couldn't speak because they signed some sort of confidentiality in the settlement that would have prevented them from talking to us.
Yeah. I actually had a chance to talk to a few of the plaintiffs, and I found it really moving to see how even years later they seemed so affected by the experiences that they had. One of John Bassoni, he was a coffee shop owner who had an altercation with a police sergeant on the street over where his vehicle was parked. And it started off as a traffic citation and escalated into the sergeant beating him with his flashlight inside of Bassoni's coffee shop in front of a huge group of people. And watching him recount this and become emotional even now, years later, over the details, was really moving. He said that he had to actually leave town a couple times because he couldn't, he still had so much social anxiety and had a really hard time reconciling his experience with how he always felt police were there to protect and serve the public. Anything else anyone would like to add? We're going to, I guess, sign off, and we invite you to join us beginning at 9 to 1 o'clock today in the comments section of this post. We're going to be available to field your questions, and we hope you join us. Thank you so much.